This is Beyond the Blue Badge, brought to you by the Microsoft Alumni Network, where we dive into Microsoft alumni stories that inform and inspire.
Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Blue Badge. I'm Becky Monk, Chief Marketing Officer for the Alumni Network.
Hi, Becky, and I'm Larry Hryb. Today, we're exploring a topic that's close to the heart of many alumni and employees, Microsoft's legacy of philanthropy and social impact.
From the earliest days, Microsoft culture has been about more than just technology. It's about empowering people, giving back, and making a difference in the communities around the world.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to hear from some of the people who helped shape that legacy, inside and outside the company. Today, we're going to hear stories from Bill Neukom, Jon Shirley, Akhtar Badshah, Mary Pembroke, Dee Dee Walsh, and Patty Stonesifer.
Let's start at the beginning. Microsoft's philanthropic DNA goes back to the company's earliest days. Here's Jon Shirley, Microsoft's first president and COO, on how giving became part of the company's culture.
Well, one of the things that I realized pretty early on was that Bill's mom, Mary Gates, was a super philanthropist. She was on the national board of the United Way, not just the local board. And she would make comments to me about, what should Microsoft should be doing something. And so I'd been at Tandy Corporation in Fort Worth, and we did the United Way every year. And that was the only thing that the company did. And we were the number one giver to United Way with the internal fundraising program among the employees. And it was very, very successful. And the company did a match to give a good grant every year. And we, despite there were several companies that had more employees than we did, we were always number one. We always raised more than any other company did. And so it just seemed to me that that was something we could do, because we were constantly being, people coming in and wanting to get appointments and talk about giving to something or another. And so we said, look, if we have the United Way, we'll just tell everybody that's what we do. We support the United Way. And because it was not a hard sell to Bill at all. It's just something that, I'm sure in the back of his mind, he knew what his mother was involved in philanthropy, but he accepted it very, very rapidly. And so I started this program, and I'm happy to say it was very well received right from the very beginning.
And Becky, many of the people you interviewed for the Alumni Voices Initiative talked about the influence of Bill Gates' mom, Mary Gates, who brought her passion for community service to the company.
That's so true, Larry. She was a force in the community and had great influence. Bill Neukom, Microsoft's first general counsel, was tasked with implementing the giving strategy and even named his division of the organization Legal and Community Affairs to encompass that giving and that community involvement. He explained that the company's approach to giving was innovative from the start.
In reflection, I think the community affairs was very well managed by, I think, Kimberly Elwiner did it for us initially. Barbara Dingfield followed her. And then, ironically and appropriately, Mary Snap had a wonderful tour of that here at Microsoft, and it's become so sophisticated and so powerful. But just to have been there in the early days, little things like a charity fair where we'd invite people on campus, and the matching program. This is another, could never have happened except in the very early years. I remember talking with Bill about and Mary and Bill Sr. were very, very sophisticated about charitable stuff, and through United Way and other organizations, and knew that big corporations tended to have matching programs. And we went to Bill and I said, we ought to have a matching program, and it ought to be available to all full-time employees, and we should match up to $10,000 a year. And he said, okay, I guess that's okay. And so I think we've raised that level somewhat, but I think for probably 15 or 20 years, we had the most generous matching program in corporate America. And another thing that was fascinating about community affairs was that it started to become interesting offshore. And it started in Europe, as you might imagine. But the Tocqueville notion of a volunteerism in the US and our tax laws, frankly, which reward charitable contributions, as we built that out in the US, we had a chance to build it out to some extent in the more developed economies where we were doing business. And it was really heartwarming to see how we could, in some ways, with humility, export that kind of a culture where we are doing well here at Microsoft, and we want to empower and in some ways fund our employees in their own way to choose. We're not going to make central decisions. This is going to be done by the individual employee. At the same time, there were some corporate contributions made. So part of Kimberly's and Barbara's and Mary's responsibilities, as I understand Mary's, is to pick charities that we think are so important and can benefit so much from our contributions that we will make a corporate contribution to them. And one little example of that, not so little, was libraries online. We thought that, and I think Bill was a part of this brainstorming, that libraries are more than just libraries these days. And if you could wire the libraries, people would come to use it. People who didn't have access to computers would come to the library and use a computer to create a resume, to do a search. And so why shouldn't libraries be sort of the center of learning in a community, especially in smaller rural communities where someone might ride a mule to go to a library, but once she got there, there'd be and we'd have friends of the library who'd be responsible for maintaining the hardware and the software and that sort of stuff. But could we prime that pump in some way? We got Seattle Public Library to be our tech partners on this, and I think it was quite a successful program. So it was giving the money and the impetus and knowledge to our employees to use this up to $10,000 wisely in a way that mattered to them, but at the same time having a modest amount of money, which we would try to use our brainstorming internally to decide where we could have an impact. Was it libraries online? Was it something else? So that was community affairs.
And as Microsoft grew, so did its impact. The company's annual giving campaign became a model for other corporations, and the scale of its philanthropy expanded globally.
Yeah. Mary Pembroke, who helped run Microsoft's community affairs group, remembers the pivotal moment when the company shifted from traditional United Way campaigns, that Bill's mom helped organize, to empowering employees to give the causes they cared about.
I started at a time that was really pivotal in the world of workplace giving campaigns. There were changes brewing in the world of United Way, traditional United Way campaigns. And that's the time that I arrived at the company. A big part of my job was running the employee campaign. So as we were beginning to plan the campaign in my first initial weeks here, I had a request for a meeting. And I will tell you that I was more afraid of this meeting than I'd ever been for a meeting. So you might say, oh, was it a Bill G meeting? Were you nervous about that? No, it was not a Bill G meeting. It was a meeting with one of the early hires, female engineers. She was hired in the 80s. And she had some ideas about changes we should make to the Microsoft campaign. She wanted the campaign to be completely open so that people could give to any nonprofit they wanted. And she wanted the matching gifts limit to be raised as well. At that time when I started, you had to run the larger part of your match through United Way to get it. So that was not a restriction that was popular with Microsoft employees. Restrictions in general maybe were not very popular. So Therese Stoll came to my office with a petition in her back pocket that had been signed by 600 people. Now, at that time, there were less than 6,000 people at the company. So after my meeting with Therese, that actually led that did lead to my first Bill G meeting. So we went up and gave him our proposal, and he listened and he listened. And I also proposed raising the matching limit all the way up. Forget all these restrictions. Let's take it up to $12,000 per employee per year. And he listened. And then he looked at me and he said, "Have you done the math on that?" And I had this moment. I was looking out the window at, Lake Bill and the woods, and he said that. I just had this moment of thinking, does anybody come in here not having done the math? That would be truly terrifying. Anyway, he had no problem with the numbers. It was really a discussion around what would this mean if we make these changes and let our employees give wherever they want and without necessarily running it through United Way. I saw the culture at Microsoft with regard to giving shift significantly in the years that I was here. And it's really funny that I still say here, but I'm here on the campus now. But, in the early years, people gave to the campaign because that's just what one did, But as the years went by, the culture began to shift because there was wealth that was being accumulated that nobody had anticipated. And I saw people begin to wrestle with that, quite frankly. There were a lot of new Porsches in the parking garage of Building 8 and all over the campus, but it was more the people that I saw who came to our group were trying to be really thoughtful about how to reconcile with this. These are engineers who would come and sit in my office and say, what should I be doing now to be doing the right thing? What percentage of my salary should I be giving? Give me an equation. Give me the math. What's the right thing to be doing here? Because a lot of the folks who landed here did not come from great wealth. They came from families that may have prized education, but a lot of people came from middle-class backgrounds. And so when they were coming to terms with this sudden, the stock would split and they would come in and sit down and say, what should I be doing? How should I be doing this? And so we counseled a lot of people, one-on-one on that. And then as the years went by, we started putting on larger events where we would bring in people from all over the country and talk about what can you be doing? How could you be doing it? What kind of organized philanthropic vehicles exist that you might want to use? So it grew and much more sophisticated towards the end of my time. It was very satisfying to see people who were so committed to social justice and health and welfare and education and the environment come in and say, how can I make an impact with this now?
Now that empowerment led to some remarkable stories. Here's Dee Dee Walsh, who used Microsoft's matching program to give back to her own high school.
What I love about Microsoft is the philanthropy. And in fact, the thing that I miss most about no longer working at Microsoft is the corporate matching. I miss that so much because what I love about Microsoft is the giving campaign was something for as long as I was there. And it was emphasized like crazy, not in a gross way, like if you don't give, you won't get promoted, but like we can take our corporate might and we can exponentially help our world be a better place. And it was just so impactful. I have so many, I'm a local, and there were so many different ways that I was able to help grow my high school. In fact, I set up a corporate computer lab back in the 90s for my high school using the giving campaign and the corporate match. I was able to fully outfit a computer lab with all of the software and give the students of my high school a leg up that, I didn't have when I was there. It was just so exciting and so great. I mean, the thing about Microsoft is changing the world didn't just start with software and what we were doing with our business, but it went all the way to our DNA, where everything we did, we were able to grow our communities and grow the organizations that we believed most in. And so that, to me, I mean, I had felt a lot of responsibility prior to Microsoft, but what Microsoft helped me to do was turn that into action. Like, I was able to learn how to give in ways that that my tiny little brain before that could never comprehend. Like, if you had told me when I was in high school that I would be able to outfit a full computer lab, I would never have believed that I was capable of that. But Microsoft taught me how to have impact. And that's the single greatest thing I think I got from Microsoft.
There are so many stories like Dee Dee's about how what they did at Microsoft shaped their own ideas of philanthropy. For many, Microsoft's culture of giving didn't end when they left the company. Patty Stonesifer, who went on to lead the Gates Foundation, reflects on how Microsoft's values shaped her approach to philanthropy.
I joined Microsoft 2 years after it went public, and I became part of the executive team a few years later than that. And I remember at an executive retreat, a lot of the executives had begun to accumulate money because of the stock price that they had never expected to have. They were there to build software. They were there to harness computing power for the future. But suddenly they were also there and getting rich. And I remember sitting in Hood Canal in Bill's home with the rest of the executive team and him theorizing there's only so many pairs of socks you can have. After that, we have a responsibility to redeploy these funds in other ways that benefit society. You know, that was just core to who he was. And the discussion around the room that was a common theme that we really ended up with the majority of the people there chiming in with their own thoughts about how this wealth being present at the beginning of this microcomputing phenomena and what it had accrued to us personally was part of a kind of a social responsibility for figuring out, once you had enough socks, how to use those resources for the greater good. And it's another thing that I think started certainly with Bill's example, but has spread through Microsoft. Bill Gates Sr. being there at the beginning, always pushing United Way and challenging us to give more and consider our community. The diaspora of that attitude that for each one of us, there is a responsibility to use our wealth, certainly to take care of our families, but to wisely figure out what we can do with society, I think comes out of that same ethos of a computer technology being released to everyone. It was the wealth and resources that we built, also in theory doing the most good for others. And that, for me, was a really formative discussion. I had thought that from my own upbringing as a social activist family, but Bill came from a very different background and had that same, and seeing that happen in the technology industry, starting, I think, in many ways with the example of Bill and Melinda Gates, and seeing the amount of technology wealth that is helping improve society in other ways has been a rewarding part of this journey.
Microsoft's giving culture has inspired not just employees, but alumni who have gone on to create their own impact. Akhtar Badshah, who led Microsoft's global philanthropy, shares how the company's approach has empowered people around the world.
There is an untold story of Microsoft's impact in the community outside of its technology. Everybody knows Microsoft's technology story. But this untold story is that there are thousands of people who are Microsoft employees and alumni who are still out there changing the world. And they're not just changing the world by doing philanthropy. They're changing the world because they've gone on and become educators. They've gone on and become politicians. They've gone on into the music and arts field. They've gone out and, taken on new challenging stuff where they've come up with something brand new and become artists. So it's that. and that license that people were given while at Microsoft to explore these things. The giving campaign just became the catalyst for people to explore a lot of new things and get engaged, so people can continue to do that while at Microsoft, and others have continued to do that leaving Microsoft. And that's the story of the company, not just its technology, but the impact its people have had on the world writ large.
And as Akhtar points out, the future of philanthropy is about more than just writing checks. It's about showing up every day with purpose.
I think what Microsoft has done is it's shifted its DNA. A DNA which is incorporating purpose, even if not as a primary driver, but as a secondary driver for all individuals in the company. And it then percolates down to the family, it percolates down to the kids, it percolates down into the community. And now you're actually creating a movement by which people are understanding that yes, there is work and it is competitive and you have to earn money so that you can live and you can survive and you can, but to really thrive, you've got to bring the community along with you. And that investment in the community, the collective we, is what is eventually going to be lasting. And that to me is how everybody should view their role in any organization, but in everything that they do.
So what's the legacy of Microsoft's philanthropy? Throughout the last 50 years, Microsoft's lifetime giving in Washington state alone surpassed $1.3 billion. And Microsoft employees have logged 6 million volunteer hours locally.
Of course, that impact is global now. In 2024, Microsoft and its employees donated $255 million to more than 36,000 nonprofit organizations. And the employees volunteered more than 1.2 million hours.
Right. And that's just such huge impact. But as Jon Shirley says, it goes beyond the numbers. It's about empowering employees to make a difference.
We're supporting all kinds of things in our community. And we also made sure that that happened in other parts of the United States where we had offices, and so they could get involved, and it would be local to their community. And I'm happy to know that it's become such a lasting thing. I think that was one of the certainly a legacy that I'm proud about. I don't think about it very often, but thinking back on doing this interview and the things that I did, that was one of the things that I'm proud about. I'm certainly proud about the fact that I can see the success of the people who worked at that time and the people that I interfaced with. And just, I mentioned Jeff Rakes, but also people like Brad Chase, and there's several that I see from time to time. And it just, they've all gone off and done really, really good things. And a lot of them have do things that are philanthropic, and some of them in the sense of giving their own time, really getting involved in something, a need, and helping to use their expertise to solve problems. And that I think is really wonderful.
And for Mary Pembroke, it's about the small changes that add up to big impact.
I'm proud of a lot of the things that we accomplished in that group. It was the whole group, obviously. I don't feel like I can, lay claim to some big moment, some big change that I made, but a lot of it was just the small changes. The people who came into my office and wanted to talk about how they could personally start to give. The information sessions and panel discussions that we put on, and bringing in experts and connecting people to other people who are interested. Oh, you're interested in cryptozoology. Well, let me connect you with this person who knows about that. I think that was a big part of our function. And I'm just proud of being part of that organization that did that.
At the Microsoft Alumni Network, we see those ripples all the time with what alumni are doing today, following their passion, finding their purpose, and changing the world again.
Now, if you're an alumni, we hope you're inspired to keep giving back in whatever way is meaningful to you.
Thanks to all of our guests for sharing their stories, and thanks to you for listening to Beyond the Blue Badge.
Now, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your network and let us know how Microsoft's giving culture has impacted your life. Until next time, keep showing up and keep making a difference.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast app. Make sure you leave a rating and review and share it with someone you know. We hope you join us again for the next episode of Beyond the Blue Badge.